everyone. Welcome to the economy part of the discussion of today's paper. I hope everyone who have written the examination and who are also going to write for the next year are watching this session. So if you just go through, just now we are done with the polity session. So as sir was saying, yes, there were around 15 questions in economy, and 15 to 20 is the standard number of questions that UPSC focus on from this topic of economy. So first let's go through the question, then I'll make my comments on whether the paper is comparatively easier or comparatively difficult compared to last year. So the first question, in fact I wanted to start it from the last, but it's fine. The first question is on money multiplier. The money multiplier in an economy increases with which one of the following? First and foremost, this is an exact question from last year, including the options. So that's the importance of going through the previous year questions. Even the UPSC didn't change, the examiner, he didn't take the effort of, he didn't make any effort of even changing the options from just last year, 2019 paper. So first and foremost, money multiplier. See, even if you don't know, I always say there's a difference between economy and economics. Even if you don't know any economics, what is a money multiplier? Money multiplier is where we multiply a given amount of money. When you are multiplying a given amount of money, obviously it should increase compared to what it was earlier. So all modern economies, they work on money multiplier theory. Means if you start with 100 rupees, this 100 rupees should be multiplied and they should be made 1,000 or 10,000 depending upon the situation. So who are doing that? Of course, banks are doing that. Banks have to play a major role in multiplying this money. So all modern economies work on this money multiplier theory. So, and common sense or no common knowledge, not sense. So it tells us that for this to happen, the starting amount of money you are starting with here, right? So if you are reducing this amount, obviously the final value will also be less than what it can be. Which means, if you go through the first and second options, both of them are reserve ratios, right? So when reserve ratios, if RBI increases the reserve ratios, the total amount of money available with the banks to lend in the economy decreases, right? That's the whole point of reserve ratios. So it decreases. If banks themselves are left with less amount of money, what can they multiply with? Obviously, so the money multiplier, the first and second options, the very fact that they are saying it has increased, you can exclude the options. Then go through the last option. Right, fine. So you need to have money, but increase in the population of a country. First normal thing that we can think of is, just because, yes, when population increases, consumption increases. That's thumb rule. Provided people have money. People should have money, first of all, to spend something. If they can't spend, how can they just increase the money supply in the economy? So even that can be excluded, where we are left with the only option, that is increase in the banking habit of people. Why? Through exclusion, you can come up with that. But what is the reason that this is the option? Because as more number of banking habits means, we are putting our money inside the banks. If more number of people are putting their money inside the bank accounts rather than holding them in liquid cash, it means banks will have more amount of deposits. With more amount of deposits, they can carry out more amount of lending. Hence, the final goal of increasing the total amount of money in the economy can be satisfied. Forget about it. If you just want the pure economic explanation, money multiplier is a reciprocal of your reserve ratio. Money multiplier is a reciprocal of your reserve ratio. So since it is reciprocal, if you are increasing this will decrease. So you can't multiply the money. So obviously these two can be excluded as well, even with core economics. So as I said, always keep the difference in mind between economy and economics. So the answer for this is C, where what we want is more formalization of the economy, more increased habit of people in terms of banking.
Welcome to Vishnu IAS Academy. We are excited to announce the launch of our new courses. Contact us for registrations and counseling. Hard work never fails. Keep learning.
Then, second, next question, with reference to Indian economy, demand pull inflation can be caused or increased by which of the following? We know that inflation can be demand pull and cost push. Demand pull and cost push. So we don't have to focus on this enough. Demand pull means when your demand is increasing. When will our demand increase? When will the demand of a product increase? First, fundamentally, when people have more money. When people are having more money in their hands. So what may cause people to have more money in their hands? All those options that we need to check. Number one, expansionary policies. Expansionary monetary policy of RBI will put more money in the banks, more money in the economy, obviously more money in the people. So yes, this can be an option. Then second, fiscal stimulus. What is fiscal stimulus? When the government feels that the economy is not working the way it is supposed to work, the economy is short of cash, or for some reason if the aggregate demand of the economy is not picking up, what will the government do? It will announce stimulus just like our Atmanirbhar package that the government has done in 5 or 10 tranches. So stimulus to targeted stimulus or stimulus to the entire economy. That's one thing. So fiscal stimulus. Stimulus is what? Easy money. More money in the hands of the people. So yes, stimulus can be your option. Then inflation indexing wages. Obviously, yes, some of you may not be aware of this term itself. Leave that for now. Then higher purchasing power. Obviously, if more income, if people's incomes are increasing, their purchasing power will increase. So more purchasing power, more will be the demand of a particular good. Hence, inflation can increase. And finally, rising interest rates. If interest rates are rising, what will the banks do? Banks will also increase the interest rates on loans. Means less number of people will come forward to take loans, which means money supply will decrease. It won't increase. The goal is that total money should increase in the hands of people. But if your interest rates are increasing, then it won't. So this is the option that you have to exclude. See where 5 is 5, 5, 5. So exclude all of them. The answer is 1 to 4. Even if you don't know what inflation indexing wages are, if you know the rest of the options based on exclusion, but we also need to know what this is, right? What is inflation indexing? If you are inflation indexing something, it can be a wage, it can be a bond, it can be some instrument, investment instrument. If your inflation indexing means the returns or the price or in this case wages, the salaries of people will be auto-adjusted according to the inflation of the economy, according to the official inflation numbers that the government will come up with. So in normal cases, if you are having just 100 rupees, if there is inflation on a relative basis, your purchasing power will decrease because you can't buy that product. But when your wage is indexed to the inflation, means if the economy's inflation rate is 10%, your wage is also increasing by 10%, so it will become 110. Means worst case, the demand is still the same because you are not left with increased income. So the demand is at the most the same, it's not increasing. Or in sometimes the demand may fall also because of that particular good, the price of that particular good need not be within this range. So what you need to understand is inflation indexing wages, at the most they will keep the demand of a product at the same level. Normally when wages are static and inflation is there, then your demand will decrease because now it is out of bounds for a customer, for a consumer. But in this case, it will at least keep the demand at the same level. Hence, you can say that, okay, fine, this is not increasing. So there is no increased money with the hands of people. Hence, so even with exclusion criteria, you can come up with this as answer, yeah as answer. Or else if you know what inflation indexing is, your friends can tell you. We have discussed about inflation indexing in. Then, again, one or two questions from stock markets were expected this year, which I have been reiterating every day, almost in every day's class, right? Because stock markets they are behaving very crazy. So obviously you can expect one question. I'm not saying I'm the only one who expected, but I have also expected. So fine. This particular point, if you remember, I have, see, this is a fact-based question. There is no concept in this. First of all, remember that. There is no concept in this. You have to be thorough with current affairs. You have to be thorough with the background of current affairs as well. So there is no concept here involved. So this is purely current affairs related question. So yes, but this one we have discussed in the class that retail investors have been recently allowed by RBI to invest in the treasury bills and government of India debt bonds in primary market. We know what is primary market and what is secondary market, right? Primary market is when it is coming for the first time. Secondary market is every other trade after primary market is your secondary market. So it has been recently RBI allowed even retail investors. Who are retail investors? Normal people like you and I, not the big shots. So this is your correct answer. Then negotiated dealing system order matching. As I said again, there is no concept. It is pure current affairs. In fact, this is not even in current affairs. This was in current affairs. So the background of this is this. This was introduced in somewhere around 2005. This is not even a new system. So this negotiated dealing system order matching is a system where the government thought that, okay, we should, RBI, government with the help of RBI, it said that, okay, we'll have this system where you can trade in government securities trading platform. In fact, this is for a secondary market actually, but UPSC thought that, okay, let's make the lives of students easier. So they did not say whether it is secondary or primary. So this is for secondary, this is for primary. So yes, this is also your answer. And while discussing retail investors, like we don't have to have touch with stock markets to know these things. While discussing about primary markets and secondary markets, we also know that more number of retail investors are coming this year into the market. In fact, RBI governor warned that, okay, retail investors, be careful. You will be slaughtered like sheep once things go against. If the tide turns against, then you will be slaughtered. So if retail, what is it? First of all, you should, to know this statement, again, this is very factual thing. You need to know what this CDSL is. Again, if you are interested in stock market, then it's a very basic thing that you will know. There are two depositories in India. One is NSDL and second one is CDSL. What is a depository? Depository is someone who will provide the services with your demat accounts. What is a demat account? Demat account is just like your bank account. For money you need bank account, for shares you need demat account. So there are only two organizations. One is NSDL and the second one is CDSL. Forget about NSDL. Let's not forget. NSDL is partly owned by majority stake by NSE. Again, there are two exchanges, NSE and BSE. NSDL is majorly owned by NSE and CDSL is around 20% is owned by BSE plus other banks. Banks like HDFC, banks like SBI, banks like other banks, but not RBI. RBI doesn't have anything to do with CDSL or NSDL. So yes, CDSL is jointly promoted by, yes, BSE is correct, but Reserve Bank of India is not. Even you don't have to know the fact. First of all, yeah, you should know these two things. Only then you can go for this answer. If you know these two things, you need not know this, because why will RBI have something to do with stock markets? Who will have something to do with stock markets? SEBI will have something. Right? Your Securities and Exchange Board of India will have something to do with stock markets. RBI won't. So if you know that, at least you will exclude this and go for 1 and 2. So B is the answer. As I said, this is not an easy question. Number 1 is based on current affairs, and number 2, they went, not even with respect to exchanges and primary and secondary market, they went to these depositories. But if you have been following news from the past 1 year, it was in news. So there is no surprise that it was. So this was asked because RBI recently allowed retail investors. This is the background to this. This is primary, this is secondary, and this is because of the increased retail participation where CDSL is increasingly opening demat accounts quarter on quarter. So B will be your answer, okay? As I said, 2 ways are there. One, through hard work, smart work, and yeah, through hard work where you know everything, which is impossible for this examination. Number 2, smart work, exclusion. Exclusion always will help you. Then with reference to water credit, again, this is both economy and a current affairs related question. It's not really economy. So with this, maybe it's in current affairs. What is this water credit? Yes, it has an economy link because it talks about microfinance. In the topic under financial inclusion, in the topic under poverty, we have something called as microfinance. What is microfinance? Financing is, all of us know, financing is giving credit to someone, giving credit to people. Micro means small. So financing in small amounts. Who will require small amounts? Poor people, daily wage labor, small street hawkers, people who are having a small scale business. Those are the people who will require microfinance. So yes, water credit is a mechanism through which microfinance tools to work in the water and sanitation sector. Yes, this is correct statement. It's purely a factual. In fact, so you can't even guess whether the options are correct or not. So you have to know it. That's the only way. Then second, it is a global initiative launched under the aegis of World Health Organization and the World Bank, which is again factually a wrong statement actually. Because this is not by WHO and World Bank. It is a private sector initiative. There is an organization, Water itself, I think the organization name is something, Water, go and check just the water.org website. So it is an NGO which is based in USA. So they are taking up this program of water credit. Yes, World Bank and World Health Organization, they have other programs which help you, which help poor people in building sanitation and water access, which help poor people to increase access for water and sanitation. But this particular water credit program is an initiative of this NGO actually. So it's a private sector initiative, not World Bank or not World Health Organizations. So you can exclude this. Then it aims to enable the poor people. Okay, yeah, it aims to enable the poor people to meet their water needs without depending on subsidies. Yes, that is also true because microfinance is all about empowerment. Microfinance is all about empowerment. So empowering people to stand on their own hands and own legs, not stands, legs. So making them more empowered. So obviously, if you are making them to sustain without depending on subsidies, yes, it is empowerment, which is the goal of microfinance. As I said, a factual question. If you have come across in the past 1.5 years, only then you can attempt this question. So what will be the answer? The answer will be, if you exclude 2, again, exclusion. If you know that second is not the option, then you can exclude. Exclude this, exclude this, exclude this. So 1 and 3. But as I said, you first need to know that this is not the option. Forget about knowing the other 2. So the answer will be your 1 and 2. Sorry, 1 and 3. Then the next question. Yes. One question was expected on RBI, not one in fact. Because the last 1 year, the government has become less active. I'm not saying inactive. The government has become less active and the RBI has become more active because of the situation, because of COVID situation. Central banks across the world had a major role to play in the economy because they are the ones who are managing this quantitative stimulus programs, quantitative easing programs, pump priming methods across the world. In fact, you must have read the other day, US Fed Reserve, just like RBI, US Fed Reserve has printed more amount of dollars in the last 1 year than in the past history. Means they are flushing the international market, of course US market, and from their international market with dollars. Hence, so central bank questions are expected this year. Then, in India, the central bank's function as the lender of last resort usually refers to which of the following? Under RBI, when you are reading RBI, RBI has certain functions of RBI. The most important function of the RBI is, it is a banker to banks. Banker to banks. Of course, it is a banker to the government as well. But This is the primary function of RBI, being a banker to banks. So keep this aside. Let's go to the options. Lending to trade and industry bodies when they fail to borrow from other sources. RBI is not a direct lender. It's a very common thing, right? RBI never comes and gives loans to normal people, right? So exclude option 1. RBI is only a regulator and it only deals with the other banks and governments, not with normal people like you and I. Hence, exclude option 1. So that option is gone. Then, providing liquidity to the banks having a temporary crisis. Of course, because RBI is banker to the banks. So, irrespective of whether they have a crisis or not, whenever a bank wants, it has to give money. That is a normal function. Whereas when a bank is facing some temporary crisis, whenever there is some liquidity crisis, that function is called as lender of last resort. Who is the lender of last resort? Our relative or our family member whom you don't go initially. If your sources of credit have dried up entirely, that's when you go. You go and ask them, you have to help me. There is no one helping me. So please save me. We use that, please save me. You are my only hope. That is lender of last resort. So a bank initially tries for funds from other banks. It tries for funds from RBI under repo window or LAF or MSF. If it is not able to get those funds from the regular windows like repo, LAF, MSF, then it will go to RBI and ask, please save me. Hence, it is a lender of last resort. So, this particular function is beyond the function that RBI performs normally. Hence, it is called as lender of last resort. So, yes, it is a lender of last resort because it provides liquidity to the banks having temporary liquidity crisis. Yes, okay. Then look at this. Lending the governments to finance budgetary deficits. In fact, that is not at all a function of RBI. RBI's function is, yes, it will do, but as a lender of last resort, it won't do that. It will only, as a lender of, it is a lender of last resort only for the banks. Hence, the answer will be your 2 only. So, this is excluded. Hence, in fact, we have seen, you must have read, all of you, when RBI is no longer directly financing budgetary deficits, it's not lending. What was the agreement in 1997? That you go and do it from the borrow from the market. I'll only manage, but I won't give you directly. So hence, this is not the function under lender of last resort. Hence, the only option is 2 only. B is your answer. Then, yeah, again, RBI governor based question. This is the reason you have to be aware of the events that are happening. In the past 1 or 1.5 years. Because all of them they'll pick up from current affairs. So what's the question now? The governor of Reserve Bank of India is appointed by the central government. Yes, right? Who else will appoint? Second, certain provisions in the, okay, leave second option. Look at the third option. The governor of RBI draws his power from the RBI Act. Of course, RBI Act 1934 is where everything is dependent upon, everything, the powers are dependent upon. Right? So, yes, this is, both 1 and 3 are the options, answers. So, just see. If 1 is not there, then this can't be the answer because 1 has to be there. So now the question is whether you know about this particular statement or not. So what is the statement saying? Certain provisions in the Constitution of India give the central government the right to issue directions to the RBI in public interest. Normally we can understand that yes, government can always give you government can always give RBI certain directions in public interest. Yes, Government of India always has that responsibility and also it has powers. But where is the government deriving its powers? If you have done your polity well, you will understand that there is nowhere the Constitution talks about the relationship between RBI governor or RBI and your Government of India. Why? Because this power is there. Yes, the central government can give under Section 7 of RBI Act. Under Section 7 of RBI Act, yes, but not under Constitution. That's where being thorough helps. Because if you just read it superficially, just read the headlines, yes, you will know that, okay, yes, central government can always do, because, of course, parliamentary democracy, government of India should always have the higher hand. RBI is just an executive body, so, of course, a legislative body, but they just are not as powerful as the government of India. That much, yes, that's true. But where is that power coming from? Not from Constitution, from Section 7 of RBI Act. In fact, why did they ask this? Because there was a constant tussle between Government of India and RBI governor. Because Government of India wanted RBI to follow a loose monetary policy, whereas RBI said that, no, we can't. In fact, when our ex-finance minister, Arun Jaitley, when he was the finance minister, he in fact said that the RBI governor is sleeping under the wheel. Sleeping under a wheel, to criticize him. For which the government, RBI governor, someone from RBI said that, no, our hands are tied, that's why. They are not able to come out of it. So they always took a dig at least when Urjit Patel was the governor. So yes, there was a constant, in fact, there was also in news because of the issue between RBI and government with respect to how much of reserves can the RBI give to Government of India. Transferring excess reserves of RBI to Government of India. So this Section 7 is so powerful actually. It's like, Government of India, if it says something under Section 7, RBI governor will be put aside. He can be kept aside. He can be just pushed out of it. He will be a governor, but he will just, a puppet. So the Section 7 is so powerful. So everything is derived out of this Section 7 of RBI. So obviously this will be wrong. Your 1 and 3 will be your answer. Okay? Then, EPFO. EPFO Act. This again is because of current affairs. No concept is involved here. This is current affairs. What was in current affairs? Labor reforms. Labor reforms were always in current affairs. So under labor reform, the government said that, okay, we'll just put everything into 3 codes. You have a wage code and you have a social security code. You have a social security. These are the 2 codes which made EPFO. There is an act, Employee Provident Fund and Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1952. We don't have to know the year and all these things, but there is an Employee Provident Fund Act where the EPFO has clearly mentioned, and in fact there are many judgments which have been clearly mentioned that all casual workers, temporary workers, contract employees, if you are paying a wage to someone and if he is in your records, then that person will be covered by Employees Provident Fund. So all people even in government department, contract employees, temporary employees, so everyone is entitled under this act for Employee Provident Fund coverage. As I said, fact-based question. It was in current affairs. So every time when it was current affairs, there are different dimensions of labor reforms. One dimension is labor welfare, and how is labor welfare being ensured by the government? Through the wage code and the social security code. So under that, this EPFO is a one small topic. So facts-based, current affairs-based. Then second statement. See, just look at the statement. We don't have to read the EPFO Act or we don't have to know about this. Constitution, there is some article, right, in your Constitution, 42 or 43, equal work for equal pay. So casual workers are entitled for regular working hours, and if they have to work overtime, they are entitled for that payment also. Right? If it's not, it's violating the constitutional DPS space. So hence, you can say that this is also an answer. Then third, the government can by a notification specify that an establishment or industry shall pay wages only through its bank account. Again, factual. If we are aware of the fact that government is pushing towards more and more formalization of the economy, more and more digital banking, this can be a step. So it is under the section 15 of your wage code, where the government can issue directions saying that pay only through bank accounts. So all the three are the answers for this question. So it will be your 1, 2 and 3. There is some confusion regarding this particular, because this has been not in the Act itself, but rather it has been through multiple High Court judgments, and there is a 2016 circular by EPFO as also, which specifically said that all casual workers are eligible, are entitled for. So there may be some, but if you ask me, it is 1, 2 and 3. We should see how people are going to interpret it. So the answer will be 1, 2 and 3. Then 93. Which among the following steps is most likely to be taken? So yeah, if we have to comment on this question, current affairs based question, so it's not easy unless you know all the facts of the question. So even if it is, you're not able to, mark it, don't worry. Then, which among the following steps is most likely to be taken at the time of economic recession? First of all, we need to know what is an economic recession. When there is a contraction in the GDP of a country, that is economic recession, right? So whenever there is contraction in GDP, if GDP is decreasing, somehow the government should increase GDP. How can the government do? Of course, first and foremost, look at the options. Cut in tax rates. Yes, if the government is cutting tax rates, people will have more money, because in a recession, people lose jobs. People's incomes are falling. Hence, they are spending less. Hence, there is less production. Hence, there is low GDP. So, where is the link? First, increase the incomes of people. Of course, the government giving jobs will take some time. Rather, first, reduce the tax rates. More amount of money in people's hands, so they'll spend more with the saved tax. But it also said that accompanied by increase in interest rates. When your interest rates are increasing, banks will increase. The same link again. If interest rates are increasing, interest rate on loans will increase. Banks will increase. If loans are increasing, if becoming more expensive, who will borrow? No investment, no GDP. So during times of recession, what you need is cut in tax and also cut in interest rates. In fact, you need zero interest rates. That's what central banks across the world do when there is recession. Near zero rates or zero interest rates. There is also a concept called as negative interest rate. What is negative interest rate? Just like how interest rate is when you put money, the bank is supposed to give you. Negative interest rate is what you are thinking. If you put money in the bank, bank will cut the money. If you put 100, bank will give you only 99. That is negative interest. Literally, that's what negative interest rate is. Why? Because government wants to propel people to spend more. Don't save money, spend money. That's the idea behind negative interest rates. But yes, this option is gone. Because it is cut in tax rates and cut in interest rates. Then, just look at the third option. We'll get back there. Increase in tax rates accompanied by reduction of interest rates. Just they have swapped the words. So again, reduction in interest rates is good. But if you are increasing tax rate, what will people eat? What will people spend? Hence, this is also gone. Then D, look at D. When there is a recession, people lose jobs. People won't spend because they have lost their jobs. People do not have money because they have to go into their savings. Once you are spending your savings, you'll be very cautious. You'll only spend on what is necessary. Hence, during recessionary times, who has the responsibility and who has the ability to spend more in the economy? Of course, the government. So the government has to, Keynesian economics, John Maynard Keynes, Keynesian economics. When there is a recession, government should spend more. In fact, Keynes says that government should, pay people for digging ditches, pay people for filling up the ditches again in times of economic recession. Spend that much, spend that loosely. It's like, wasteful. Don't worry in economics. Even if it is wasteful, do that. That's what Keynes says. So if you are reducing expenditure, how will the economy come out of a recessionary phase? So even this is not the answer. The opposite is this. Increase in expenditure on public projects. The fact is that public projects means government expenditure. What we need to understand is public project means government expenditure. So government has to spend more during the periods of economic recession or depression. During economic recession or depression. So yes, the answer is B. Then next. Yes, good question. But again, a basic question which requires basics of economics here actually. So of course the question is on law of demand and supply. The question is on law of demand and supply. So what is the question saying? Consider the following statements. Other things remaining unchanged, market demand for a good might increase if. So it is talking about, sorry, not demand and supply, demand and price. It is about demand and price. That's what is of major concern for us. So what is being asked? When will the demand for a good increase? There are different types of goods in the economy. Okay. So one type of good are called as, a particular category of goods are called as substitute goods. Substitute goods. What is a substitute good? As the name says, if I can substitute this pen with another pen, it means that the second pen that I can replace with is a substitute good. So let's say that there are two pens. This is one pen, this is one pen. So this pen can be easily substituted by this pen. So if the price of your substitute good increases, means if the price of this pen is increasing, obviously I don't want to buy this pen. Rather I will buy this pen because now this has become cheaper. Hence demand for this pen will increase obviously. So hence price of the substitute good increases, market demand for a good will increase. Yes. So whichever option is having 1, so 2, 3, 4, you can exclude this because 1 is the answer, it should be there. Then second, price of a complement good increases. What are complement goods? Best example of complement good, what can we say? There are many complement goods. Let's say ketchup and noodles. Sauce, your ketchup and noodles. At least I hope that all of you use ketchup while eating noodles. So if let's say that the price, so here, whatever you are adding, you are complementing noodles with ketchup. Or we can say salt and pepper. Salt and pepper is a complement on a pizza. So if your complement good price is increasing, means in the case of noodles, if your ketchup price is increasing, or in the case of pizza, if your salt and pepper or the dressings have increased, there can be some number of people who are not interested in eating either the noodles or not eating the pizza. At least I'm a kind of person. I won't eat noodles if there is no ketchup. Which means my complementary good, if the price is increasing, my money is limited. So if my complementary goods price is increasing, the original goods demand is falling. Because I won't buy a pizza or I won't buy a noodle now. Hence, if the price of its complement good increases, the demand of the original good will decrease. It won't increase. Which means second option is wrong. Come here, see which all have the second. So again, B is excluded already, D is also excluded. So now the debate is about 1, 3 and 4, 1 and 4 only. Look at just the fourth option. Normal, right? You don't even have to listen to economy class. If the price of a good falls, you will buy more number of goods. Means your demand will increase. So this is your answer. 1 and 4 can be answered, but there is 3 also. Which includes a concept of inferior goods. What are inferior goods? Obviously, something which are inferior in quality. Right? Why will I go for an inferior good when I don't have money? When I'm earning less, when I'm poor? The minute my incomes rise, the minute my salary rises, what will I do? You eat in the nearby stall on the road, initial days when you are a student. Once you become officer, will you come and eat at the same stall? Of course not. You will eat the same pani puri, same golgappa somewhere in a posh restaurant. Why? Because that has become an inferior good now, because your income has increased. So, inferior goods demand will decrease when your incomes increase. So, your incomes have increased, inferior good demand will decrease. But here we are being asked about whether demand is increasing. When will it increase? Hence, this is wrong option. So, there are 3 or 4 concepts here. First is demand and price, then substitute goods, then complement goods, Then inferior goods. Inferior goods. And how rising incomes will affect. Again, normal, common knowledge. You don't have to have any principle. You don't have to have, you need not know like core economic principles. Normal, you can just do this. Think logically. Your CSAT can help in this question, in fact, with the words. So, it is not a difficult question actually. There are 3 or 4 concepts intertwined, that's it. That may be the reason why this question might look as difficult or moderately difficult, but it is neither. It is an easy question. So answer will be your 1 and 4, because both of them we can be excluded. Then next question. This question has been asked because it has been constantly in news from the past 1.5 years. Again, current affairs based question. Current affairs based question. Only if you know about, if you are following the current affairs, you can answer the question, because when you may be reading urban cooperative banks as part of your banking sector or under agriculture. But the fact is that you won't go and look at this level of regulation. This level of regulatory aspects. You know the concept, but this has been in news, that's the reason it has been asked. Look at the first statement. First of all, look at the second statement. They can issue equity shares and preference shares. Yes, they can issue. RBI in around June 2021, around June or so, it came up with guidelines. There were already guidelines. It has updated the guidelines for urban cooperative banks in terms of how they can issue equity shares and preference shares. So it was in news. We don't have to go and read all those who all can issue shares or preference shares. We know how many people can be issued, what are the conditions to be issued. We don't require that. The fact that RBI came up with guidelines in June, it was in current affairs. So yes, if RBI has come up with guidelines, it means that they can issue equity shares and preference shares. So yes. Then look at the third option. They were brought under the purview of Banking Regulation Act 1949 through an amendment in 1966, which is a fact. Normally also, all the banking sector activities, all the banks are under the regulation of RBI, and urban cooperative banks and rural, all the cooperative sector, cooperative banks themselves, both rural and urban, are under the purview of RBI. RBI issues, if RBI can issue these directions, it means that they are under the purview of RBI. Forget about yes, the fact that it has been done in 1960 is a past thing. But if you know this fact that RBI was able to issue and it has issued in June, it means that this should also be true. And if this is true, this should be false. Why? Go through the statement. They are supervised and regulated. If RBI is regulating under here, why will state governments again regulate? Hence, you can exclude this option, and these two answers are correct. There will be a state government nominated officer. That's a different thing. But the state government won't set up a group. It won't set up a board. Cooperatives, what's the idea of cooperatives? They will elect their own chairmen, MDs, chairmen. Democratic control of cooperatives. You're a leader in your polity. So state governments won't create a local. They won't set up the board and they don't regulate. Because RBI is the regulatory body. So if you know this is true, this will be false. If this is false, this has to be true. This is anyways, it was in current affairs. So the option will be 2 and 3 only. And if you know that this is false, again, exclusion. Some of you may think that, okay, whenever a statement is false, it will be put in all the 3 options and it's very easy. Let's take a guess like that. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's a pitfall, okay? UPSC is also smart. If you can think, UPSC can think 1,000 times better than you. Don't worry, don't worry. All of us also have done the same mistakes. So the option is, the correct answer is 2 and 3. Again, this can be a debatable point because This can be a debatable point because some people may say that yes, it's a dual controlled. Cooperatives are dual controlled, not cooperative banks. That's where the confusion may arise. Cooperatives can be dual control, but we are talking about cooperative banks because you have multi-state cooperatives also. Then, next question. Indian government bond yields are influenced by which of the following? Yes, the words, the options, going through the options may sound as if the question is a difficult question. It's not a difficult question. But yes, it's not an easy question as well. But it can be said as a moderately difficult question. But I wouldn't say even it is moderately difficult because it's an easy question because they haven't gone into the concept of what is yield, what is bond price, what's the relationship between bond price and yield. They are just simply asking you, Indian government bond yields, forget about Indian government also, bond yields are influenced by which of the following? That's the question. For which you need to know the basics of bonds, the characteristic features of bonds. Bonds have certain characteristic features like a face value, coupon, they'll have a maturity, they'll have face value or par value, all those things. Along with that, there is something called as a yield of a bond. There's something called as a yield of a bond as well. Forget about the economic definition of yield. Normal English meaning of what is English meaning of yield? Yield is how much you are getting. What is the return on an investment that you are receiving? That is yield. So, the question is about what will change the return, the yield, the total income that I am going to earn, my future income, profit. What will change the bond yields? First and foremost, actions of United States Federal Reserve. Nothing but Fed tapering. Right now, we are in the midst of Fed tapering. What is Fed tapering? Yes, this I can claim. I have discussed this in my class, so don't worry. Fed tapering. Tapering is when the US Fed Reserve is taking away the US bonds from the market. It is taking away the US bonds, it is buying back. All these days, it has bought from the market. Now, whatever it has extra, this easy monetary policy or the quantitative easing measures that the US Fed has done until now, it is slowly now the economy is growing normally. So, the economy doesn't need the stimulus programs now. So, whatever the additional liquidity that the Fed Reserve has injected into the economy, now it is sucking up all that extra liquidity. Tapering means it is reducing the money supply was this much earlier. Now it is slowly reducing it. That is Fed tapering. So yes, actions of United States Federal Reserve in terms of Fed tapering will have an impact on Indian government bond yields. Why? Because those extra dollars that I've just discussed in the earlier question, US Fed Reserve has dumped dollars in the economy. If those dollars are being sucked out, what will happen? There will be a flight of dollars from the market. It may sound as technical, but it's a basic thing. Because of free dollars have come into emerging markets like India. So now if the dollars are leaving, it will have an impact on Indian government bond yields as well. Because investors are going away because of Fed tapering. Then second, actions of Reserve Bank of India. Again, whatever US Federal Reserve is doing, the same thing Indian Reserve Bank is also doing. Indian Reserve Bank has done something called as Operation Twist. I was expecting a question on Operation Twist itself, but they have expanded the scope of Operation Twist and they have included even these two. This is nothing but Operation Twist. The whole idea of Operation Twist is the RBI wants to sell short-term maturity bonds and buy back the long maturity bonds from the market. That is Operation Twist. It changes inflation, it changes the interest rates, hence the bond prices. So that's the goal of Operation Twist. Let's not go into what Operation Twist is there because we have other topics as well. But it is as part of Operation Twist which this question is being asked. Further, you need to understand that bond prices are inversely related to interest rates. And yield of a bond is again inversely proportional to bond price. These are the two identities that you should know. And finally, inflation and short-term interest rates. Forget about these two. Don't you think these two will always affect any return on any kind of investment? That much we can understand. Because inflation and the interest rates will always have a bearing on my returns on any kind of investment that I have made. In fact, when there is high inflation, people will go into fixed income securities. Means where my income will be fixed. So, yes, inflation and short-term interest rates are the fundamental things which will impact the yield on any investment. It may be a bond or it may be some other thing. And both of these actions as well will have a bearing on the government bond yields, Indian government's bond yields. So, which makes your answer as 1, 2, 3. As I said, it depends on which side of the question you are looking at. So, it can be moderately difficult. But it's not a completely difficult question. It's not an easy question as well. Because you have to know the bond concepts, properties of bonds. Only then you will be able to answer that question. Then, let us just make small change. I'll discuss this question first. Which one of the following is likely to be the most inflationary in its effects? All of them will have inflationary. Keywords are always important in the question. Question is being asked, which one of it is most inflationary? So look at them. Repayment of public debt, of course, it can't be an answer. Second, borrowing from the public to finance a budget, it is not. Because borrowing is the best way for the government to finance its deficit. Third, borrowing from the banks to finance a budget deficit. In fact, budget deficits themselves are inflationary. So they are inflationary, but look at the fourth option. Creation of new money to finance a budget deficit. Monetization of deficit is the most inflationary. It's a very basic fundamental feature of deficits. So all deficits are bad, but financing a deficit by creation of new money is the most inflationary. So your answer is D. People who have listened to that video, they'll know classes. Then, which one of the following effects in creation of black money in India has been the main cause of worry to the government of India? Again, this is one question which can, evoke different responses. Different people will come up with different answers, because if you look at all the options, all of them are effects of creation of black money. Diversion of resources to purchase in real estate and investment in luxury housing. Yes, because it's not black money. If you're investing in real estate, it's not that productive. Second, investment in unproductive activities and purchase of precious stones and jewelry and gold. Can be, because if you are just investing all your money in gold, that can be a problem. Then third, large donations to political parties and growth of regionalism. Yes, it can be a problem as well. But all of them are secondary effects. In fact, investment in real estate creates employment. Construction sector is one of the biggest, second most, in fact, employment generator in the country. So if you are investing in real estate, it is good, it's okay. Who is to decide what is productive and what is unproductive activity? Anyone can invest in any economic activity. Depending upon its potential, it may be productive or unproductive, but there aren't any completely unproductive activities. So there is some kind of confusion in this statement as well. Then large donation to political parties and growth of regionalism. This is tangential. Yes, it is a problem, but it need not be just black money, right? It can be white money also can be donated for these causes. But what is the most important effect of black money? The very nature of money becoming black is because you are hiding it from the state's resources, state's eyes. Once you are hiding it from the state, it is not giving any kind of revenue, tax revenue for the government. Whether black or white, all of these are possible. But this is possible only because of black money. Hence, this will be your answer. The most Main cause of worry, not general cause of worry. Keywords are important. So the most important concern of the government is that loss of revenue, tax revenues are being lost because of such type of creation of black money. Then comes two more questions. There is a reason why I haven't gone for those two questions, because there is no debate about this. This and these two questions. Consider the following. Foreign currency convertible bonds. What are FCCBs? FCCBs obviously which are issued in foreign currency. They are issued in foreign currency. It's a bond. It is a debt instrument. But it is also convertible. Means in future this bond can be converted into equity shares. FCCBs, we have discussed the concept. So FCCBs, that's the nature. First look at the nature, then they are asking which of them can be included in FDI or foreign direct investments. First of all, it is in foreign currency, means it has to be, let's say it has to be given in dollars, dollar or anything, dollar, euro, anything, but it is in foreign currency. Number two, it can be converted into equity share in the future. Some money which is coming from foreign, it can have a characteristic feature of FDI. RBI has said that. RBI has said that. Yes, FCCBs are considered to be FDI into the country. Why? Because of the very nature of FCCBs. Though it is a debt instrument, it can become an equity instrument later on. It can be convertible. Hence, it is treated as FDI. Then second, foreign institutional investment with certain conditions. Yes, what do we mean by that? First, let's just ignore this. Come to the third. Global depository receipts, GDRs, ADRs. If you remember, if you can recollect, they are just money which is being raised by companies in foreign exchanges, in foreign countries. And what is the underlying instrument of a GDR? The shares of the company, whatever the shares they are buying. So they are buying the shares of the company. Though it is a GDR, the underlying instrument, it is a derivative instrument. The underlying instrument is the share of the company. Hence, it can be a foreign direct investment. RBI allows even GDRs to be treated as FDIs. Then comes your foreign institutional investment with certain conditions. Again, some kind of interpretation can be done here. Creative interpretation is possible in that, because there is a rule which the government has brought in around 2015-16. It wanted to simplify the differences between FDI and FII in computation of FDI and FII. Earlier there were too many interpretations, too many rules and regulations which were causing a lot of confusion. But the government simply said in 2015-16 that if FII investment in any company is greater than 10%, it is automatically FDI. It is automatically FDI. So if you just go through the face value of that statement, of that rule, if FII investment is more than 10%, then it is FDI. So what is our statement, our option saying here? Foreign institutional investment, FII with certain conditions can become FDI, right? FII with certain conditions. Had it been just FII, we could have excluded this option. But it is saying FII with certain conditions. Isn't this a condition of FII which is making FII into FDI? Hence, 1, 2 and 3 can be your options. Fourth one, look at the fourth one. Non-resident external deposits, NRE accounts. Basically, we are talking about NREs, people who are outside India. If they are opening a bank account, if they are depositing the money in the bank account, how is it related to shares of the company? Because FDI, FII is about buying the shares of the company, not putting money in the accounts of the banks. So this has nothing to do with foreign investment at all. So answers will be FCCB because of these characteristics, FII with certain conditions because we have a rule, and global depository receipts because the underlying instrument is share. Hence the answer will be 1, 2 and 3. But where can be the creative interpretation possible? It is not, it need not be done. But with respect to this, people may say that it is FII. It is FII. How can FII, the minute it is crossing The minute it is crossing 10%, it is becoming FDI. So you shouldn't call it as FII anymore. What is the rule? More than 10% FDI. So the minute it is crossing 10%, it is FDI. So you can't call it as, so hence exclude that option. That can be interpreted in that way, but if you ask me, no. 1, 2 and 3 are the answers. The last question of economy. Again, watch out for this question as well. Multiple interpretations are possible for this. The effect of devaluation of a currency is that it necessary. Devaluation was also a very important concept, expected concept. So the effect of devaluation of currency is that it necessarily, should not miss that keyword. Because with that word, answers change. Necessarily means what will happen for sure. What will happen for sure. I'll give you the answers without this word and with that word. First, let's see without that word. The effect of devaluation of a currency is, number 1, it improves the competitiveness of domestic exports in the foreign markets. Yes, right, when you read devaluation, why will a country go for devaluation when it is having crisis? First of all, to earn easy money. Through exports, your exports increase because they become more price competitive. They become more price competitive. Now they have become cheaper in your foreign markets, which is a very first impact of devaluation. So hence, this is the answer. Second, increases the foreign value of domestic currency. Always remember, what is devaluation? $1, if it is 50 rupees, after devaluation, $1 will become 100 rupees. Sorry, $1 become 100 rupees. If you are getting, the dollar is the same for the foreigner. If you are getting, earlier it was only 150 rupees, now you are getting 100 rupees. Let's say that this is 1 unit, now you are getting 2 units. If this is the case, can we say that this has become more expensive now? Sorry, can we say that this has become more valuable now? Earlier you are getting only 1 item. If you are getting 2 items, did your currency become more valuable or did the item become more valuable? Obviously the item has become cheaper. It has lost its value. If you are able to buy more number of goods with the same amount of money, it means that there is some decrease in the value of these goods. The goods are currency. So it won't increase the value of the domestic currency. In fact, it reduces. That is the idea of devaluation. For them now, earlier $1 used to give 50 rupees, they are getting 100 rupees now. It means that what will you get? You will get more of something when its value has decreased, not when its value has increased. So that logic, you can exclude this. It won't increase, it decreases. And finally, it improves the trade balance. Yes, it can happen. But that's not, yes, of course, that's why we do devaluation, right? Take away effect, all of them, you read them. But that's not the answer. So your answer is not 1 and 3. Of course, 1 and 3 options themselves are not there. Lucky for those of you who have taken the exam. The fact that there is a word called as necessarily mean, yes, this will happen, no doubt about that. Then this won't happen, we know that. Improves the trade balance. Yes, you generally read that. When there is a BOP crisis, countries go for devaluation, balance of trade position improves. But it need not be necessarily. Will it happen guaranteely? Because your exports are becoming cheaper, they are increasing. But with devaluation, what about your imports? With devaluation, your imports also become equally expensive. What if they are emergency imports, necessary imports? Imports are becoming expensive. So if you have started with a BOP crisis, best case scenario is you are still at the same level, you haven't worsened. Because your exports have increased, they are bringing in dollars, but your imports also have increased in price because of your devaluation. Which means that the trade balance need not necessarily improved. This particular thing has been discussed in my, this I can tell. Yes, I can claim. You can talk with my students, they know. I have discussed this specific case. So, keywords are important. The answer changes with the word necessarily. That is the keyword here. So, it won't necessarily improve. Of course, this is not, because your value, currency has become cheaper now. Hence, the answer is 1 only. This is not a difficult question. It's a very basic question if you understand the concepts properly. I won't even call it as moderately difficult. Because you need to know concepts. Conceptual clarity is what is important. So these are the 15 questions from economy. If you are, I won't say that you should score these many, but easily they can be, it's not, at least for economy, I wouldn't say that the questions are difficult. Around 12 to 13 questions are based on concepts. There are 2 or 3 questions based on complete current affairs. But concepts are there. And remember, they haven't asked economics. They have asked economy. Always remember that thumb rule. Yes, yes. My student here is smiling. Yes. So, with that, so there are 15 questions, and compared to last year, I will say that economy has become easier. Relatively, economy has become easier. You should see last year's question paper. This is easy paper comparatively. But yes, there are some tricky questions, and as I said, this will evoke different responses. Because interpretation, creative interpretation can be done here. Anyhow, all the best for every one of you. So we'll conclude here, right? Thank you, and if you have any questions, you can always contact our team. Vishnu IAS here, right? So looking forward to meet you guys again. Thank you guys.